it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. This is a semi-follow-on video, but semi-just standalone video where I am using up all these scraps that I have in front of me from a video that I did on how to make really quick guys cards. Now, for this, you do need some sort of double-sided adhesive sheets. Now, I do have the double-sided tape and permanent adhesive roller there. These don't work quite so well because it's easy to get gaps. So there's two here. This is the stickered adhesive, and then the other one is the scrapbook.com double-sided adhesive sheets. I like the scrapbook.com ones because they are really thick, whereas the stickered ones are really thin, perfect for die cutting and things. So I have cut out a sheet here the same size, well, pretty much the same size as my little piece of cardstock. I'm folding back just a tiny corner up there of the adhesive, so that little bit is showing. And then I line up the bottom part of the card before I push down to the top and then pull the rest of the release paper down. And that way I don't have all my adhesive sheets hanging off the side or little extra sticky bits. And I have pretty much got my whole sheet covered. Now, I didn't measure them perfectly exactly, but that's okay. This technique today is called the grouting technique, where you are going to do something similar to kind of tiling and grouting. Now, I do have a couple of longer strips here that I didn't end up using in that video, so I'm just cutting these down to be slightly smaller. But in general, I really do have the scraps. These are all the pieces that I cut off the edge from my previous cards. So I will link that video down in the description box below in case you are interested on seeing the first video that I made. But all you are going to do is pull off that release paper, and I literally just start piecing these together. Now, it is kind of not a perfectionist sport. I struggle with that sometimes, and this is kind of one of those techniques that I have to be okay with uneven gaps and slightly bigger gaps, smaller gaps. And really, I just pick up a piece that I want to pop down and I kind of just find a spot for it. Sometimes you'll see me put the piece down again. Sometimes I just need to turn the piece of paper around. I often kind of keep turning my card front around so that I get a different perspective on how pieces could fit in. I feel that that helps me a bit, but other than that, I keep kind of just placing little bits down, and I try my best at the beginning not to kind of cut things to fit, because I really just find that that gets me in even more of a pickle sometimes. So I just do my best. I'm trying to keep, as you can see, a little gap in between all of my pieces that I am popping down. I do not want them butted up next to each other. I want there to be a little gap, and of course I've pulled the release paper off, so this whole card front here, it is completely sticky, and as I said, I'm just turning this around, and then every now and then I will turn the piece of paper over and cut off all of the overhanging bits, and that just gives me even more different shapes to play with, and I just keep going and keep going until I think I have as much covered as I possibly can, remembering to leave the gaps. That's really important because obviously we are grouting, so those are the gaps that we want to fill in. So make sure that you don't forget to leave those little gaps in between. Then once I have it pretty much finished, this is the result. Now, there are a couple of different options for what to use here. The first one is glitter, and this is actually completely fine because you can really push it into those crevices and it does not come off because these are really strong adhesive sheets. So I don't mind this one at all for glitter. The other option that you can use is, of course, embossing powder. And again, this is a really good option, and obviously it's not going to go anywhere. So I'm just kind of picking out a couple of colors that I think would work really well for the colors that we have from the Honeybee Great Outdoors 6x6 paper pad. That's where these pieces of paper originally came from. And I am going to show you both of these techniques today. Again, these are very simple cards, but a really fun technique for using up your scraps. So I have cut my piece here in half, and I'm going to do the glitter on one and then the embossing powder on the other half, just so that you can see both. This is some really fine glitter from Elena Crafts, and she has some gorgeous glitters there. I'm using the little piece of release paper to kind of push it all into place. I don't love getting my fingers all into glitter, so that's why you see me using a couple of tools here and things. I like to keep the mess to a minimum if I can. I'm going to pop the rest back into the jar, pop the lid on, and then I just take my bone folder to kind of use it to really push that glitter in place. There is no way I want any glitter off. I'm not a fan of glitter flaking off or kind of getting sparkles all over me whenever I open something glittery. So I can imagine that the recipient doesn't love that either. So here's the result of the glittered one, and all of that grouting in between is all filled in. Here is the second one. This is silver embossing powder, and again you could choose any. You could choose copper, would have looked really nice in between here, or the gold. I just chose to go with the silver to keep it nice and simple, and then you just heat this like you would any other embossing powder. Now it does kind of mean that you can really only put one layer of embossing powder. It wouldn't be that easy to put two unless you wanted to kind of go over it with an embossing pen, perhaps go over, but in my opinion, one looks really perfectly fine, and this is the result of the embossing powder one. So now it is time to kind of turn them into cards. You can see the glitter here and then the embossing powder one, and they look very similar. I think, in my opinion, one is slightly glittery, more sparkly than the other. Now I picked up this piece of paper here, and honestly, out of my stash, I thought it was black, but it actually turns out it's like a really, really dark green, almost like brownie green, I guess. But I'm happy to make that work. I thought it actually kind of went well with the colors that I was using, so I'm happy to use up a little piece of cardstock. So I cut out two of the smaller, really dark green ones, and then one size circle I went a little bit bigger, and I have cut out a piece of white cardstock. That was using the Hero Arts Infinity Circles die set. Then this is the Chunky Greetings stamp set. This is a favorite of mine. This font just looks really fun and kind of light-hearted, and I really like this look. So I am going to emboss a couple of these. I have used my anti-static powder bag on both of these little pieces. That's why you can see that kind of white powdery coating on it. And one of these is going to say best wishes, and the other is going to say enjoy your day. I think you can definitely do this technique with and make it kind of more feminine colors or more masculine colors. There's definitely you could do it for any occasion at all. I'm just kind of showing you a little bit perhaps more masculine colors because this is the offcuts from my Guy Cards video. And honestly, my family tells me when I'm getting low in a particular kind of area in my card stash, and they kind of go in and hunt out what they need, and they say, Tash, you're running a little bit low on this. So I am going to make some more cards for guys and things, and I'm going to keep it really, really plain and simple. But I am going to show you two different little looks here. So I've also cut out a couple of panels here of that same really, really dark green cardstock. And those are cut to be 4 by 5 1/4 inches. So I just need to trim a tiny little bit off my piece here so that it matches up to that layer. My card bases are going to be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And so I really like that nice little white border around the outside. Now I did want a couple of little matching strips here, so I went and had a look for some really thin double-sided tape, and I had a couple that were really thin, but I chose the thinnest one, and I am going to pop one piece down each side of my panel here. Now I did cut this down a little bit thinner just so that it would work for my card front, but I can keep all of those little scraps as well. So I know how my card layout is going to go, and I kind of know how I want everything. I'm just holding that panel in place whilst I pop down some of the double-sided tape either side of it. Now this would work if you are doing either the glitter or the embossing powder, because again the embossing powder is going to stick to the tape if it's what you choose to do, but this one is for the glittered panel. So I'm going to take off the release paper, add the same coloured glitter down both of those strips, and then treat them exactly the same as I did the grouting. I am just going to pop the rest of the glitter back in. I do not want that spilling, and then use my bone folder to really press in, and any little bits of glitter will come off. So you can see that it's kind of looking pretty good. I'm going to pop my panel straight down the middle. I'm going to pop this on flat because I'll add a tiny little bit of dimension to my sentiment there. So I am using the multi-medium glue in the matte finish. This one is from Ranger. This is my favorite glue, and I pop it into those little glue bottles. Please remember that I will pop everything down in the description box below, all the links to all the products that are still available, and if they're not down there then they probably aren't available anymore. But have a look in your stash. I feel like pretty much everything in this video you perhaps already have if you have been card making for a bit. So I feel like you would be able to create these with your little scraps and bits and pieces. Now I did actually end up just popping up the sentiment. The first layer I put on some foam dots, some foam squares that I had, and then I popped the rest of it down nice and flat, and I'll show you the finished card in just a minute. I'm going to do a little bit different for this one, kind of a similar layout but just a little bit different. I have some burlap ribbon here, which I just use. If you cut off one side of this, then you can pull all of the individual strands apart, and all I'm going to do here, I'm going to pop the sentiment up on some same foam squares just to give it a little bit of dimension for the card, but not too much. If you are intending to mail these, then it is really easy to kind of keep them flat, and these are fun cards to create that are nice and flat for mailing. I am going to do the same thing here where I use some matte medium to pop down my first layer, and then just as a little bit of added something extra, and I'm going to pop down a couple of little pieces of double-sided tape at the top and the bottom. I managed to put it in the wrong place at the top on this side, so now I'll put it in the right place, and this is just behind where the strip goes down the front. You could use any type of ribbon or twine or gold metallic thread or silver metallic thread, seeing as I use the silver embossing powder, and I'm just running these from top to bottom, and I'm kind of crisscrossing them over a little bit so that they are all kind of you know, not so straight and not so perfectly up and down, so they kind of just look like they've been wrapped round and round and round the card. And then I'm just going to cut off some of the extra little tails at the back to keep it nice and neat and nice and flat. Pop another little bit of tape over so that they are secured. Pop some liquid glue on the back here, and the sentiment will sit right in the middle, just pretty much like the layout of the first card that we created. And then again, I will use the liquid glue to pop this onto my card base. So I hope that this video has given you a few ideas on how to use the grouting technique. It is a fantastic technique for using up any kind of scraps. Of course, these would look fantastic even if you were to just put these down on the adhesive sheets in a diagonal pattern, like some strips diagonally, and make sure that you leave the gap in between for the grouting, so it doesn't have to be just scraps at all. But here are the two finished cards. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks, bye!